When the Shah of Iran boarded a plane out of the country, he didn't know he was leaving for good. Within 6 months, the global price of oil had nearly doubled. The world had built its entire energy system on the assumption that countries like Iran were stable. They weren't. This is Libromastro, History's Accounts. Every empire kept a ledger. We open them. Before 1979, Iran was the second largest oil exporter in the world, behind Saudi Arabia. It produced between 5.5 and 6 million barrels of oil a day, roughly 10% of global output. Most of it flowed to Western Europe and Japan, the same economies that had been shaken by the 1973 OPEC embargo, and had since rebuilt their energy systems, assuming the disruption was behind them. The Abadan refinery, near the Iraqi border, was the largest oil refinery on Earth. Iran had the infrastructure, the technical workforce, the contracts. In every practical sense, it was load-bearing for the global energy system. Iran was also, at the time, a close ally of the United States, and American companies were deeply involved in its oil sector. The country's leadership used oil revenue to fund ambitious modernization, industry, infrastructure, one of the best-equipped militaries in the region. The relationship looked stable. It wasn't. The revolution that toppled the monarchy had been building for years. Its causes were many and are still debated, and this isn't the place to settle them. But the economic dimension matters for what came next. The oil-funded modernization drive had produced rapid growth in some sectors and deep dislocation in others. Rural populations moved to the cities faster than the cities could employ them. Traditional merchant and religious institutions were sidelined, and dissent was suppressed in ways that generated broad opposition. Through 1977 and 1978, protests escalated. By late 1978, the situation was untenable. In January 1979, the Shah left Iran, officially for medical treatment. He did not return. The opposition leader, in exile in Paris, flew back to Tehran in February. The monarchy was dissolved. A new republic was proclaimed. The revolution had happened. What the world had not calculated was what it would do to oil production. In the months around the revolution, Iranian oil production essentially stopped. Oil workers had struck in late 1978 as part of the revolutionary movement. Foreign technical staff, Americans, Europeans, evacuated as security collapsed. The management structures of the old regime fled or were removed. Iranian production fell from around 5.5 million barrels a day in late 1978 to under 500,000 by January 1979. A drop of more than 90% in a matter of weeks. It recovered somewhat as the new government stabilized the sector, back to about 3 million barrels a day by mid-1979. But that was still 2.5 million barrels a day below pre-revolution levels. In a global market of about 60 million barrels a day, that was roughly a 4% cut in supply. 4% sounds modest. It was not. The 1973 embargo had removed a similar amount and triggered a 4-fold price jump. The market had learned the lesson. Even a moderate supply cut moves prices violently because oil demand is inelastic. You can't quickly stop using oil when the price rises. You need it for almost everything. So, traders and governments who knew that history started buying immediately, driving prices up before the physical shortage had even fully arrived. In 1978, crude oil sold for about $13 a barrel. By early 1979, as the revolution unfolded, it reached 16. By the end of 1979, above 26. By 1980, when the Iran-Iraq War began and Iraqi production was also disrupted, it peaked around $35 to $37 a barrel. A near 3-fold increase in under 2 years. For American drivers, the price at the pump went from about 65 cents a gallon in 1978 to over $1.20 by 1980. And this time, unlike 1973, there was no specific decision to reverse, no embargo to lift, no negotiation to run. The supply was lower because a revolution had happened, and revolutions do not come with a timetable. The 1979 shock hit Western economies that were already wrestling with inflation, left over from the first oil shock and from the loose policies of the 1970s. The result was stagflation, a word that barely existed before that decade because the models of the time said it shouldn't happen. Inflation and unemployment were supposed to move in opposite directions. High inflation meant a hot economy and low unemployment. High unemployment meant slack demand and falling prices. The 1970s broke that model. Rising energy prices pushed up the cost of producing everything while cutting the real income of households and the profits of firms. The economy shrank and prices rose at the same time. In 1979, U.S. inflation hit 11.3%. Unemployment was near 6% and rising. Governments faced a dilemma with no clean answer: raise interest rates to fight inflation and risk a deeper recession, keep rates low to protect jobs, and risk letting inflation spiral. The Federal Reserve, under its new chairman, chose to fight inflation. Paul Volcker took over the Federal Reserve in August 1979. 51 years old, 6'7", with a reputation for being exactly as blunt as he looked. His diagnosis was simple. Inflation was the main threat, and the only way to break it was to raise interest rates high enough and hold them long enough to destroy the expectation that inflation would continue. On a Saturday evening in October 1979, he called the Fed's committee into an unscheduled meeting, and then did something the Fed almost never did. He held a press conference. Saturday night, with the markets closed until Monday, the benchmark rate went from around 10% to over 20% by mid-1981. 20%. At that level, borrowing is nearly impossible. Investment collapsed. Home sales collapsed. Mortgages were unaffordable. Unemployment climbed past 10% by late 1982. The Mail told him what it was costing. Home builders with nothing to build posted him planks of lumber. Car dealers with nothing to sell posted him keys. He kept going. Medicine's oldest instruction is to do no harm. Volcker had concluded that here, the harm was the treatment, and that letting inflation become permanent would be worse than the recession that stopped it. In the technical sense, he was right. Inflation fell from 11% in 1979 to about 3% by 1983. The recession was severe, but finite. The political cost was severe too. The economic misery of those years was a major factor in the 1980 presidential election. The 1979 shock accelerated shifts that had started after 1973. Western governments poured money into non-OPEC oil. North Sea fields, British and Norwegian, were pushed forward with urgency. Alaskan output expanded. By the mid-1980s, that new supply had grown enough that OPEC's market share had fallen well below its 1973 peak. Energy efficiency standards tightened everywhere. Fuel economy rules for cars, insulation standards for buildings. The average fuel efficiency of new American cars roughly doubled between 1975 and 1985. And the experience of stagflation reshaped economic thinking itself. The old confidence that governments could fine-tune unemployment through spending was discredited in many eyes. The approach Volcker embodied became dominant. Central bank independence, inflation targeting, price stability prized over short-term growth. That became the orthodoxy of the next 2 decades. The revolution in Iran lasted weeks. Its effect on Western economic policy lasted decades. The oil market we live in now, its strategic reserves, its diversification, its price mechanisms, was built, in large part, around the memory of 1979. Every contingency plan for a major supply shock runs the same scenario. A large producer goes offline suddenly for reasons outside anyone's control. That scenario isn't hypothetical. It happened. The whole system assumed that the places the oil came from would stay calm. One revolution in one country proved how fragile that assumption was. 4% of the world's supply stopped moving. The price tripled. The other 96% never stopped. What changed was the certainty that it would keep arriving. A crowd in the streets of one city repriced the entire planet's economy. This is Libromastro, History's Accounts.